But again, you're going to ask people about bequests, remember, because that's also growing from just under 770 billion up to 200, oh, that's 3 times, 237 billion. So find those donors who, especially women with no children, who have been loyal donors who are 50 or over. You can invite them to a seminar about estate planning. Maybe Clark Schaefer can help you organize one, I don't know. But don't want to speak for you, Luke. You can invite them to a session where they talk to, where among the group are other people who have already made bequests to your organization. And they're primed to talk about, yeah, I'm so excited, I just put such and such group in my will. I know people who are 40 who have put organizations in their will now. COVID really made people aware of estate planning as an option. There's a thing called freewill.com. It's very simple will, but somebody can make a charitable bequest in that will, as long as it's signed and appropriately for your state. It's a valid will. I hope you never get an estate from somebody who's 40. But people who are 40 who start thinking about it when they're 50 and 60 and 70 are more likely to keep charitable bequests in their will as they mature. Okay, I'm not going to do that. So on the uses side, this is what we call the recipients. Religion is and has been, since Giving USA started, the largest single category of charitable recipients in this country. This means the congregations, the organizing bodies for religious entities, the diocese, the synod, the presbytery. It doesn't mean St. Elizabeth's Hospital, where my brother was born. It was run by nuns, but it's a hospital. It goes in health, even though an order of nuns founded it and ran it. They don't anymore. It was bought by Dignity, but it's Moody Bible Institute. In this community, it's probably a lot of the Islamic centers would be in religion. And that 85% of that comes from households. I just read that figure recently. Somebody did this study. Thank you. It's been a while. Human Services, for the first time ever, is now second in terms of the amount that was received. This is because education dropped. Education is remarkably tied to the stock market. And Human Services is supported by 30 to 40% of the population. And during COVID, we had a lot of support for food banks, for child development, for all kinds of things that were related to helping people endure those 2 years. So Human Services was 14%. It might not stay above education in the future, I don't know. But it did in 2022. And it's 72 billion. Human Services is, let's see, the Child Abuse Prevention Organization, Allie's Grief Center, counseling, Allie's Place, right? I got it right, finally. Who else in here? The Women's Center would be with Human Services. St. Louis Center, okay. Any of the others of you? Okay. It's also legal aid, job training, all the positive youth development organizations, scouting and so forth, the WISE, both WISE, Red Cross, even though they do blood collection, they also do disaster relief. So a whole bunch of other groups that are in Human Services. It's the largest category, has about 100,000 organizations nationally. There's around 300,000 churches, 100,000 Human Services organizations, 4,000 institutions of higher education, and I don't know how many primary school districts are raising money, and scholarship funds through the Greek foundations and so forth. This is third at 70 billion. This would be tutoring programs as well, but most of it, about 70% is higher ed. Gifts to grant-making foundations. Now, this is a relatively new phenomenon. That means it's in my lifetime. So we started, gifts to grant-making foundations was 6% of the total when I first edited Giving USA in 2021. And they were mostly bequests. And then we had that stock thing, you know, and we had all those increases, and it started to grow and grow and grow as a percentage of the total. So it's now 11% of the total. This is not the gifts to DAFs. This is to private foundations and community foundations. And so Next year, about 2.7 billion will come back to the nonprofit sector because they have to give away 5%. Those new foundations, that new money that went into foundations last year is appreciating. But even if it didn't appreciate, 5% has to come back to the nonprofit sector in the coming year. So watch the foundations in your area. Yes, go ahead.
You said in 2021, you noticed that was going up.
Yeah, it's been going up steadily, and this is the 2022 number. Maybe I misspoke, maybe I meant. It started in 2001 is when I started editing Giving USA. It was 6%, and it has gradually gone up since then, so now it's 11%. I probably said it wrong. So this is the savings account for the future, and it will come back. It just takes a while. Health is obvious. That's going to be all the nonprofit organizations around here that raise money for health. McKenna Foundation is in this group, and others as well. Public society benefit is that wonky category that includes the National Donor Advised Funds, National Christian Foundation, National Philanthropic Trust, the ones with bank names. All of those are in this sector, as well as United Way, as well as, if there is in this area, a Black United Fund. Any group that collects money from lots of donors and then rehands it out that isn't a community foundation, because they count as foundations. So that's 9% of the money going in. Now they give, this public society benefit sector gives back a large percentage of that in the same year. So just as the foundation amount, we can say, oh, 5% of that is going to come back next year. This money, this 46, maybe 30 of it came back, but we didn't get to count it because it's not new money. It's transfers from individuals to the giving entity to us. Does that make sense? So the individual typically makes the gift, shows up in the 64% from individuals, but it doesn't hang out in an endowment like education. It might hang out at Harvard, just to use one example. Here, it's actually coming back to the other organizations in the community that are all around this wheel. It's just very hard to track. Nobody tracks it. International affairs is obvious. COVID pushed that up a little bit because people were giving for international assistance. Arts, culture, and humanities. This includes the history centers. This includes language learning programs. This includes cultural preservation programs, not just the symphony and the art gallery. Environment and animals is also obvious, and that's where Amy's group clearly is, right? So 16%. This set of priorities, if you will, of American philanthropic giving has been very consistent, with the exception of this human services jumping above education for 10 years. Doesn't mean it'll always stay this way, but I don't, even with the investment in climate change mitigation that's happening now that we read about, this 3% might grow to 4, but it's not going to grow to 13. Because all these other things are supported first. There's this category here, gives to individuals. This is largely for pharmaceutical companies that give their product away. It also includes some scholarships, it includes some grants to artists, but it started being big enough to capture when it became a way for pharmaceutical companies to distribute their medicines to people who can't afford them. Are there questions about where your organization sits? Are there questions about these percentages? The percentages are fairly consistent, but it's really the distribution that matters. Religion's the highest, environment's the smallest. Yes?
I know this is preliminary, it doesn't include Ukraine, but I'm curious if anything from religion and human services might be circulating back to you.
It could, yes, I'm sure it does. I'm sure much from religion has gone for the war. It should, war relief, it should be here. International affairs as well. And some people gave directly. Ukraine was very savvy as a banking system of inviting some of us to bypass the American charitable system entirely and give directly through their banks. So that will never show up. Because it's not in an American charity. It won't show up in Giving USA.
It may also represent a drop in the first when you get to 2022.
Yes, that might be part of the decline, yeah. Okay, so again, these are the one-year changes, year on year, which are helpful, but not trend. They don't inform me a lot on trends, so I talk about it, but I don't dwell. Again, religion has grown and above the rates of inflation, which is pretty astounding. Religion typically doesn't grow much above the rate of inflation. In this case, it's just a little bit below inflation, but this 6.3% in 2020 to 2021 was much above the rate of inflation, and that's highly unusual. Typically, when people get an increase in their salary, they will increase their giving to religion, if they are religious donors, at exactly the same amount, and not use that increase to add new charities. So religion tends to grow just with inflation. When people start to grow their incomes quite a bit, then they start to add new charities. So people with, I don't know, $50,000 or less in income are likely giving to a religious organization and maybe a human services organization once in a while when they feel they can afford it. People who start to get like $75,000 to $100,000 in income, if they're giving to religion at all, they'll keep their giving to religion fairly steady, and they will add additional charities as their hearts are moved. Above $200,000, about 75% of the people give. Half of them are giving directly to religion, and they give to 7 or 8 different types of charities. Is that clear? The number of charities that we support is very strongly associated with our income level. The religion is supported by about 40% of the population, and human services by about 30%, and it goes on down from there. Arts is about 8%, environment's like about 8%, with smaller gifts typically than the arts. This is not in Giving USA, this is Melissa's 30 years of immersion in this data. So, education, I said it fell. It's strongly tied to the stock market. It rose tremendously in 2021 when the stock market was up. Human services fell. Again, it's a negligible difference. We say it didn't change when it's minus 0.6. Again, people were continuing to support human services during 2022. Foundation giving, it grew. That was probably one person's estate. I don't know for sure. I haven't looked that up. And so on down the row. I don't counsel using year-on-year changes. Again, get 5 years of your current dollar changes in the amounts that you raise and compare those with the Giving USA data. If you're way below the Giving USA trends, you have some work to do on how to make your mission more compelling. If you're way above the Giving USA trends, you're at much higher weighted trends, yes, you're doing it right. If you're sort of consistent with Giving USA trends, you're doing fine. But if you're way below, then you really need to think about how your mission is expressed and who you're reaching. Yes, Rebecca?
So this might be skewed by the fact that my mother was a controller of an arts not-for-profit for 40 years. But she had told me that, and again, this was probably 10 years ago, so, that the highest net worth individuals disproportionately donate to the arts and not human services. Is that?
They will give more to the arts, absolutely. When they give to human services, and a fair number do, they give a much lower dollar amount. So it might be $10,000 or $100,000 gifts to an arts organization and $10 gifts to the food bank. So if you average it out, yeah, it's going to look skewed. In terms of percent, I did a study in 2006, so again, that long ago. The percentage supporting basic needs was very high, but they were small gifts. So your mom's right in that sense, in the dollars. Any other questions about these trends, how to use these data, where you are, what you want to tell your board, what you want to tell your development office? Okay, so this is the same thing adjusted for inflation. You know, it's more bad news because more of the blues are on the left side of the line, which means things fell by adjusted for inflation. This big drop in public society benefit, for some reason when the stock market didn't go up so much, the donor advised funds didn't grow as fast. It's a duh. So it doesn't mean that people stopped caring about the League of Women Voters or the United Way. because most of us, when we give to United Way, are giving out of income, is the donor advised funds that are being funded from assets that really hurt in 2022. That report hasn't actually come out yet, though. The National Philanthropic Trust hasn't analyzed the data yet for 2022, but I'll predict that when they release it in November, it will show a decline in the gifts to donor advised funds exactly because of the market. And environment and animals was another one that was strongly hit, adjusted for inflation. Okay, so this one is so unfair to ask anybody to look at on a screen. But I want to point out, this bottom piece is religion. And it's a very dark, sort of goldenrod color. And it's $521 billion for the 5 years that ended in '87. And it's $729 billion, $730 billion for the 5 years that ended in 2022. This is adjusted for inflation. Giving to religion just barely keeps pace with inflation. There's a couple things going on. One is the decline in religious participation, which I'm sure you've read about. And the other is the fact that people don't tremendously increase their giving to religion. When their income goes up, they tend to add another charity or two to their giving plan. I'm not even going to bother. This dark blue one here is the public society benefit piece, and it's $27 billion in the 5 years ending in '87, and it's almost 10 times as high, not quite, $239 billion in the most recent 5-year period. That's the donor advised funds. But it all comes back. The National Philanthropic Trust data are so clear that those funds are distributed within 5 years. For the most part. I mean, yes, there are always exceptions to any statistical statement, but that is so clear. And it has been that case since they started tracking things in 2007. Again, religion was almost 60% of the total way back in the 80s, and now it's 29% for the most recent 5 years. People have not, yes, there are some people who have stopped giving to religion. People have added more charities. It's just that other types of charities have grown faster, including the public society benefit, including education, including environment and animals, which was barely on the map. So small down here I can't even show it to you. And it's let's see, which one is it? It's this gray bar down here that's 3% of the total, most recently. So those are some of the trends in as the American priorities, if you will, for charitable giving. Yes?
Do they have it broken out by like what percentage of individuals give to?
They don't.
Okay.
We were able to do it 1 year, I think it was 2016, because a whole bunch of reports all came out at once, and we could, get the Foundation Center study, and we could get the IRS study about what bequests we're doing and so forth. But it hasn't happened again.
Okay.
There are some. What subsector are you in? Human services. Yeah, I don't think they do this anymore. Once in a while, there will be an umbrella organization that does a study of its members. So there's a study of the arts that's done, and there's a study of the theaters, in particular, theater communication groups and so forth. There is a group in Washington that's an assembly of human services organizations. I can't remember the name of it, but it's been a while since they've done that. There have been other priorities organizations. Y'all don't like to answer surveys. I tell you, as a data collector, that is so frustrating, because you ask all these great questions and I can't answer you because, you have other priorities. Answering some weird lady's survey from Indiana at the time, it's like not high on your list. So I get it. So, yeah, we don't really know. This is the trend line for the percentage of gross domestic product that comes from charitable giving. Remember I said back in the 80s? When I started working at the Center on Philanthropy in 91, now it's the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, but at the time it was called the Center on Philanthropy. Part of our case for support was that charity was dying as an American activity. It had previously been 2% or more of gross domestic product. It fell in the 70s, somewhere around 75. Anybody remember what happened in 75? So a few of you might be old enough to remember.
Energy crisis.
Energy crisis, a few other things, yeah, having to do with crisis of trust in institutions. And charitable giving fell. Many Americans lost faith in the institutions that were an integral part of our society, and they stopped wanting to pay taxes, they stopped wanting to give to charity, they stopped wanting to vote. There are a whole bunch of activities that sort of dwindled in the late 70s. And that stayed down there until that stock run up. And then all of a sudden it was front page news, people were creating these new foundations, these young kids, 28-year-old on paper billionaires decided to give money to foundations, and this really pushed it up. Then Warren Buffett and Bill Gates got together and said, hey, all of us really rich people, we should give our money away, so they created the Giving Pledge. That hasn't moved the needle a whole lot, but it put philanthropy on the front page of the news for a while. And so it's been around 2% of gross domestic product. It fell this year to 1.9%. Again, stock market, less urgent needs appearing in the news, people's concern about their financial futures with high inflation. Those are all drivers of philanthropic giving. Inflation is moderating, high employment, people earning almost living wages in many cases. If we could get the housing costs under control, we'd be in much better shape. But and appreciation in the stock market for those people who are invested and feel like that's either a financial cushion or they have the assets where they can make the gifts. So this has been a good trend. So this is where you can get the book. It's really hard, givingusa.org. And then if you want any of the data tables and things, there's some stuff there. I have a couple other things I wouldn't mind mentioning if I have time, Luke. Thumbs up for that. So this decline in the number of donors, it's percentage of households that give. This is something that lots of organizations are trying to work toward ameliorating. And the data that I've seen suggests that people just feel like they can't afford it. It's not so much about a loss of trust in institutions, although that's part of it for the kids. My kids are 30, right? So they're like, why should I give to a charity? I'll just give the money directly. They're really asking that. That's fine. I tell them what I think. But it really has to do with people feeling like they are very cash poor. And so I wanted to see what is a discussion with this nice group, what you are doing or what you think you could do to help people feel like they can afford to make, I'll say, a $5 gift a month to your organization.
It's the story, the human story.
Tell the human story, okay? Good.
One of our biggest challenges is that because many of our donors are also our service recipients. And I keep talking about the Meyer down the street from my house. And I moved here in 2020 to get cucumbers were 38 cents each. Now they're 79 cents each. Literally double.
Mm-hmm.
And if your entire grocery bill doubles, you don't have it. So we're really struggling with the ask when people are coming to us for more services if they can't afford it.
Okay, so the Women's Center in particular, a lot of their donors are also recipients of services. So expanding your network of donors is going to be one suggestion. It's a long process, I know. But also the cost increases that people experience in their daily lives, especially in food budgets and gasoline, some other expenditures that we can't escape in any way. Nobody's going to say give up dinner to make a charitable gift, right? That's not an option. So helping people find even small changes that they could make that people typically want to give. If you ask people, do you care about this cause, they will say yes, whatever the cause is, if they're somehow engaged in it. So finding other ways that people can help. So sometimes there are alternatives to cash that can help the organization quite a bit. Sometimes people can give products, they can give gifts in kind. Sometimes they can be a witness or offer their testimony and tell your story. going back to, I'm sorry, I can't read your name tag, but the point of the lady in the peach jacket, telling this story. So if there's a woman who feels comfortable, even if you anonymize, don't use her name, sharing how the Women's Center has helped her, that can be a way she can give back that isn't cash, that can help leverage some of those new donors. Being willing to speak publicly sometimes, like the Rotary, Kiwanis, sometimes PTO organizations like to have speakers come in from the community, and that can be a way that people can make others aware of the organization's need. One of the big drivers that happens is that if you can, and you can work with a large employer, nonprofit or not, in the community and organize a volunteer day for their staff. Many times people who work together on solving a problem in a nonprofit organization, painting or putting stripes on a ball field or whatever, if they work together, they learn about the organization's mission. Some of those people will then become donors. Because they get really interested in the organization, they meet you, they start to trust you. You say, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I can give $5 a month for whatever it is. So those are just a couple things that people are doing to try to expand their network of donors. All of them are hard. All of them take time. Absolutely. It's hard to choose if you're, there's a lady in front of you who needs help right now versus building for the future. You were going to say something, I'm sorry, I kept going.
Yeah, if you have any other stats on volunteers, we have found that when we rope in new volunteers, eventually about 80% did.
Absolutely, 30% of the population above age 17, this isn't 2019, so it's the most recent study that I have. 30% of the people above age 15 volunteered somewhere at a nonprofit organization, or that includes their congregations. Typically, people who do volunteer give more to organizations at which they volunteer than they give to organizations where they don't volunteer. So it's a trust building factor and an investment. I'm a partner. I'm working to solve the problem. It is, however, extremely difficult to run a good volunteer program. And it takes a staff person, and it takes, how do you have volunteers who don't interact with kids when you're serving kids who are vulnerable? That's a big issue. What can you have people do that is appropriate, that gives them the reward for doing something good in their community when you work with a group of people who don't and should not be exhibits in a zoo, or just anybody can come and talk to them. So, as you think about this, do keep in mind who you serve, how you can use volunteers. How could you close your center for a day and have people paint? Do you need painting? If you don't need painting, don't do it. If you need something else. I've seen groups where a hospital I did a study for paid for the items for back to school bags. And they had their, essentially, team staff put together these back to school bags for kids who were in one of the community programs. They never met the kids. They heard about the program through the staff who attended the volunteer event, but the staff members felt like they were doing something concrete to help those kids get a good start to the school year because of the stories that they got when they were working there. So it was safe for the kids. It was at the hospital. The actual activity was at the hospital, so that more employees could participate. They heard the pitch, the story, the compelling narrative about why the kids needed the back to school things. And some of them then gave on-site, and some of them became individual donors on a monthly basis. So to the extent that you can create those kinds of situations, yes, do it. Don't make yourself insane about it, though. Other questions or thoughts about how to engage new donors? Yes?
I would say
Go
a
ahead.
matching challenge.
Absolutely. A matching challenge is a very good idea. If you have a board member or somebody else in your community who's able and willing to say, I can give $10,000 and you do XYZ. XYZ should include new donors, not matching existing gifts. So if, this is the first time you've given in the last 3 years, your gift will be matched. If your gift goes up from 100 to, by at least to 250, your gift will be matched. If you're using it just as a matching gift, you're likely to get existing repeat donors and it won't have that benefit of attracting new people. In all cases, you do excellent stewardship, you get a thank you letter out immediately, you essentially have them queued up, so they're all ready to go. And if nothing else, it's just we know this is just a form letter, but we want to rush this to you right away, and then you follow up with the more personal thank you later. Yes, great idea. Yes?
As a follow-up to that, can you talk about match frequency? Because we have gotten ourselves, many of us, into the situation where donors won't give until the next match. So,
Yep. In that case, you're offering matches that are too much focused on existing donors and not enough focused on recruiting new. I don't have data about match frequency. I know 1-to-1 match is enough. You don't have to do 3 times. You can do 1-to-1 match. The data all show that if you just offer, we'll double your money, that's good enough. I have not seen a study that's about, I know NPR stations do this. Yeah, do this often, but I don't think they're using their matches strategically. My college does a match only with, if you haven't given in the last 3 years, or if you increase your gift from at least 100 to at least 250, then those are matched. So they're using it strategically, in my opinion, to inspire gifts from people who might not otherwise be inspired. There's another technique that I've seen used, and this would need some volunteers, but it doesn't need tons and tons of volunteers. You need a phone list, so you need people's phone numbers. And the first set of phone calls is to thank them for whatever they've done already, whether they volunteered or they've given or they gave 5 years ago. I wanted to get in touch, thank you so much, your work is so important, your help is so important. You're always giving the donors kudos for what they've done so far. And then you say, someone will be in touch in a few weeks. We'd like to see how you'd like to continue to be involved. So you queue up the next call. And then the same person or another person calls in a few weeks and says, now that you've had some time to reflect, would you be a donor again? Could you give at least X? Would you like to be engaged as a volunteer again? Could you give Y? Could you introduce us to some new donors? You have 2 or 3 options. Don't overwhelm people, not 7 or 10. 2 or 3 options, but giving is definitely one of them. There's a phenomenon where if people have a chance to reflect, they can take time to figure out how to afford it. But first they need to hear from you how much you appreciate them and what impact their prior gifts or prior volunteer time or prior whatever they've done has made a difference. And that can work for anybody on your list. Yes?
That's something I do, and use the board.
Yes.
Use your board.
Use your board or your development committee. Absolutely. How many of you are actively engaged with financial institutions, not as clients, but as members of your board or development committee members or as donors? Banks, credit unions. They all have a community reinvestment requirement. And they are often looking for nonprofit partners to help them essentially meet a federal law that says that a certain percentage of the banks, or less so for credit unions, but has to be reinvested in the community. So especially if you're working with populations that might be considered low income, talk to bankers in your area. Ask them for suggestions for board members. Ask them for suggestions for committee members. Ask them for suggestions about how you and the bank can partner to help work together on your shared vision of a better community. I was glad to see so many hands going. Yes, your board members can be great for that. You can even ask some of the people who say they'll volunteer to be the people to volunteer to make the calls, as long as they're comfortable and you have a training program for them. Yes, sir.
I'm wondering if anybody here has any success stories about social media fundraising. We have not had great success.
There's a reason for that, actually. It has nothing to do with your organization. Anybody have a success story? I want to hear some. Yes, go ahead, Rebecca.
Venmo, putting on Instagram, hey, Venmo us $5, and we've got that. So it hasn't, changed our budget. We can raise $1,000 out of it, but every once in a while we have where running low on tampons, right? If you can't drop off the box, can you Venmo us $5 or something?
So a very specific need, a very short time frame, a very easy payment method. So The Venmo is one that people are liking a lot, even more than PayPal these days. Generally speaking, social media is not a very effective fundraising technique. It's a great education technique. Yeah, Amy.
I was just gonna say, as CEO of our organization, when I turned 40, that was the only successful social media fundraiser we had. And 43 doesn't matter, but 40 that year, I raised $1,000 for my birthday.
Okay.
For the
So,
organization.
mostly from your friends.
Yeah, friends,
Right.
family, board members,
And
whoever.
I hope some of them continue to be donors, that's great.
But,
But yeah, it's a very difficult thing. If you have a lot of people who are willing to turn landmark birthdays into a fundraising activity for your organization, that's helpful. People can get tired of it because they're often in the same communities. Oh my gosh, it's Courtney's birthday. Oh my gosh, it's Amy's birthday. Oh my, you know. So that's something to be attentive to. But nationally speaking, the apps that people use for promoting ourselves don't work so well for generating gifts. I'll use Amy's example, though, as the caveat that they do. The very specific requests, I've seen Facebook used also for very specific requests. Day center for people who have no home. You know, we need peanut butter, same deal, drop some off or use the link to make a gift. You know, it's only today, because we will fill the need for peanut butter by tomorrow. But it's really hard in that case to get the contact information. And the whole point of fundraising is to turn a one-time impulsive donor into a repeat donor. Right now, the renewal rate is 42%. So that was for 2022. People who first gave in 2021, 42% gave again in 2022. And it's the lowest it's been since they started keeping track in 2006. So that's why we make the thank you calls, that's why we send the letters or emails or postcards or whatever to report back about what we're doing. I give to a lot of organizations, because it's, I do incentives for people to do surveys. I say, if you're one of the first 100 people, you'll be in a drawing and I'll make a gift to your organization. So I get all these lists, right? Big and small organizations all across the country. I get very few follow-ups about impact. I get lots of invitations to events. I get lots more appeals. But I almost never get, we wanted you to know how your gift made a difference and here's some of the things we accomplished. And a postcard is a super great way to do that. Not the little tiny, one that you might send from a vacation, but although maybe you guys could do that, but she's in an environmental group. But one of those bigger ones like the window salespeople send you or the insurance people send, it's cost effective. Nobody has to open it, right? It doesn't have to say thank you for being a donor, outing the donor as being a donor. It says thank you for all you've done to help us. Here's what we've done in the last year or so. And some key landmarks. And then you follow it up with a request in some way. Yes?
Can you talk at all, or do you have any stats on the difference in what you send out, whether it's a postcard or a newsletter, between impact and information?
Yes, actually. Donors say that one of the most compelling reasons for them to stop giving is that they get too many asks. Now, how many is too many? Well, I worked with a food bank once, and they said 13 was just the right number for them. Yeah, exactly. That was my response. 13 appeals per year. They sent 13 appeals per year. They said if they cut it down, they didn't get as much. I don't know how they did this. That was at the end of one spectrum, right? On the other side is the once-a-year appeal. That's not enough. I say every 6 to 8 weeks, your donors and volunteers should hear from you.
On impact.
This is what I say. Thank, educate, engage, ask. So, yes, educate and engage are both about impact. And, anytime they make a gift, you thank them. During the rest of the year, they need educate and engage. Engage is ways to help the organization that are not necessarily money. Introducing you to new people, coming to an event, sending in a box of tampons if that's what people need, ways to help that are not necessarily cash or financial. And then educate us about the issue, the impact that you're having, the way their dollars make a difference. So I try to do all 4 of those. And the ask is about every 6 to 8 weeks. And I do short. I make it so the emails can be read on a screen.
Right.
You know, and I have my screen big, so if I can't read it when I open my email, it's too long. It can go to a link that tells me more. But you're one of our best friends. I wanted you to know right away that we just got this big bequest. Or I wanted you to know right away about our new season. Here's the link to go see who's coming. Or I wanted you to know right away that we're serving even more people and the needs in our community are rising with inflation. Here's how you can help. And then make a link. Not weekly. Yeah, exactly. Nobody will open it. It's 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 3 to 4 if you're in a crisis situation. Would make sense. Yes?
So you said from 2021 to 2022, 42% of those people didn't give again.
No, the other way. 42% did.
42% did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
58% didn't.
Gave again.
Didn't give again. Uh-huh.
What's that number from 2020 to 2021?
Oh gosh, you're really taxing my memory here. It's not above 50%. It's in the 45 to 46% range. But I mean, again, I slept since I last saw it. That's too bad. It's called the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. And if you go to afpglobal.org and look for Fundraising Effectiveness Project, you'll get access to the reports. They come out quarterly, but you want the one that's year on year. So,
Fundraising.
Effectiveness Project.
I didn't sleep and I couldn't even remember that.
Yes?
Giving Tuesday and the holiday season, any thoughts?
Yeah. Yes and yes, both are good. Giving Tuesday raised more than $3 billion last year. That's in 2022. It's still not a huge percentage of the total, but it gets lots of excitement going if you can support it. And this goes back to that social media question. You need a big list to make Giving Tuesday happen. And you need a lot of advance work to get people who will push that little thermometer way above a quarter of the way, even before you launch. So if you can't do that, don't do it. And this is true whether you do a Giving Day on your own or not. Columbus City in Ohio has their own Giving Day. It's been going long before Giving Tuesday. And they try to raise money for the Columbus Foundation for every nonprofit in the community. But they've seeded things so that they know who some of those donors will be and so forth. Again, you want to make sure that it's the new donors. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who save up their gifts for Giving Tuesday are repeat donors because they want those matches or whatever. So it's there. You can do it. Some people really want to. I know one young man at an art museum who thinks it's the best thing since sliced bread. Like, Tony showed me the data. But, you know, he thinks it generates enough excitement for his younger donors in particular that he'd like to do it. I'm sorry, you asked a two-part question. Giving Tuesday.
The holiday season.
Oh, the holiday season.
How many times can you hit them in the holiday?
Well, one, I don't say hit anyone. I say give them a chance to partner with us. And two, you don't want to overdo it. So September, November seems to work. Some people do October, November, December. That seems to work. If somebody's already given, you're not repeat mailing. So the whole season should be designed as one theme or one package. It should alternate between email and letters. Different people respond to different things. It should be branded or designed in such a way that they know that you're going to have maybe in October you send an impact story and you say we're going to follow up, you know, because the giving season starts in November, watch for our special mailer with new information in November, you know. You can tee it up or cue it up so that people want to open the postcard, for example, and then they'll get the next mailer, and then the email follow-up, and then the telephone follow-up if they still haven't given. So you use all the touch points that you can. There's a point at which people will stop paying attention to you. I can't tell you what that is for your organization. It depends entirely on your donor group. You know, millennials say, don't ask me too often, I want to give with my friends, I want to do this. My mother, every time you send her something, she'll give you $5. She doesn't remember that she made the $5 gift before. She's 88, you know, so don't abuse her, please. So you have to know your donors and what they're interested in. One way to do this is to convene a council of donors. Have, 8 donors around a table, provide desserts or coffee or whatever, and say, we're thinking about doing this. How would you react? What do you think about that? What do you think about this? Do you know people who would like this? Who could help? And get them engaged at that level. They shouldn't be, you could have a first-time donor, but somebody who's shown loyalty in some way, who you think would be a good informant, a good participant in that kind of discussion. You can also have a development committee to have those discussions. Rebecca? Okay.
I'm sure the fly.
Oh, I'm sorry. But so yes, you can engage. Don't just do this in your office. Engage people who are part of your audience to see what they'd like, what they'd value. I was at one organization where we did a communications audit, and they had 7 different versions of their logo. Don't do that. You know, somebody would do it for this program, and somebody would do another one for that program, and, try to make things consistent enough that they follow through on themes. In this group, I can mention, sometimes when I speak, I cannot mention any specific vendors, but in this group, I can recommend Classy. They have great online materials about how to do online campaigns, about how to do giving pages for your on your websites. If you use them as a vendor, I'm sure they're going to be even more helpful than the stuff they provide just for the whole sector. But they seem to be doing a really nice job of education about frequency, about how to, what they call them impact blocks. So the gift amounts are tied to some kind of impact. $100, I worked in homeless services, would be a night in a hotel for a family that couldn't otherwise stay in a shelter together, because men and women have to be separate. $250 would do this, $1,000 would do that. So they call those impact blocks. They have ways to structure those. They talk about use of colors, designing pages. I thought they had some really good materials. They talk a lot about email. I mean, that's what they do, right? So email mailing and web page landing pages for giving. So I'm sort of getting a sense that my time is up. Y'all might have other things you want to do today too. I'm here until noon anyway. My flight doesn't go until 2. Anything else? I'm so glad you could come. Thank you so much. It's great to see everybody. I don't know if Clark Schaefer will have me back again, but maybe we'll see some of you next year.
Thank you, Melissa. Hopefully that was informative for everyone. Clark Schaefer appreciates being able to put on these events for the community. We appreciate that. And if you guys need anything throughout the year, we're always available. If you have questions, comments, anything, accounting-wise, auditing, tax, any of that, we are around. We also have volunteer days that we partner with not-for-profit. So if you do have group outings that we can put together, I usually coordinate those. So if you have those, feel free to reach out to me directly, and we're happy to put a group together when we can, as long as it's outside of busy season and not around tax deadlines or anything like that. But thank you all. There's plenty of food in the back if anyone wants anything. And thank you, Melissa, for speaking. And hopefully we'll have you back. I know you've been going strong in Ohio for 15 years or so with us, and so hopefully we continue that and bring that up here. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.